I always tell my friends and colleagues January and February's workload seem like the one of a whole year in the matter of less than 60 days in normal circumstances, the world as we knew it before November 2019. The COVID 19 pandemic remains still the most pressing crisis for humanity as of now. After 2 years and almost 4 months, we are still struggling with the medical front in this war. As discussed this week with the Gates Foundation and G0 Media, with Mark Sussman, Ian Bremer, Jose Manuel Barroso, and others, the issue of equitable distribution remains on the table. We had more of a reactive than a proactive response to this crisis. I always repeat it. We have chosen to abide by the new normal. That process leads to the subconscious of mankind, the general population, to think that the pandemic is over. Yet it is a mistake. The constant development of new variants with new proteins added to equitable distribution issues is keeping us still in the medical front, like I have invoked. From the perspective of the conference, there is a reason for optimism in parts of the world that have managed to vaccinate a majority of their population, but in regions like in Africa, there is a deep concern because the virus and the effect remains very unpredictable and very unsettled. Optimism elsewhere should be approached with caution and humility because more surprises may await us. There is still a lot we need to learn about this virus. So the world will overcome the pandemic as long as it takes in consideration several parameters. Sadly, many low income countries are still struggling to get vaccines and distribute them properly. With only 11% of the African continent vaccinated, much more needs to be done. So why have some countries fared so well while others have so called languished? The world has not provided equitable distribution, according to Mark Sussman, the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which came at the cost of living loss that could have been saved. Uh, Before a vaccine was available, countries agreed in principle to distribute a future jab to the most vulnerable. But once a vaccine was developed, Sussman explains that domestic political pressures in Western countries led to a free for all instead. But as of the lessons to be learned from the unequal distribution, Sussman pointed that two areas. The first one is finishing addressing the current crisis and ensuring effective delivery of vaccines to the unvaccinated. But second, we get regarding the aspect of future health threats by ensuring there is enough volume of treatments available in low and higher income countries. To be ready for the next pandemic, it's very important to have all the tools and structures in place, including good surveillance, research and development, and manufacturing capabilities to respond to health threats within a couple of hundred years. You would think that a global pandemic threatening millions of lives would pull the world together in search of a solution. Instead, we have witnessed political fragmentation in the United States and elsewhere, and vaccine inequity is a characteristic worldwide. Looking back at the fight against COVID by having the struggle in 2020 to one of fighting a war with bare hands. Last year, vaccines became the main tool for fighting back. This year, it's very important to have every tool at disposal, including self testing, vaccines, boosting vaccine equity worldwide, ensuring access to new drugs to prepare for the next variant, which might cause severe disease. The bottom line is to have an objective to get downhill into this crisis and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. One of the most ravaging domino effects of the pandemic already in 2022 is the truck drivers crisis all across North America, in the United States and Canada, as we have witnessed lately. There are also concerns in the industrialized countries in Europe, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Spain, for instance. We had to be in time a little bit further from the end of the 20th century to look clearly at the difference of magnitude between millennium marking milestones and century marking ones. Indeed, if the latter group is characterized by a series of impacts on human and economic mobility, the first group goes a little bit further by touching the human behavior, belief, uses, and customs. Of course, both groups could constitute events that mark mankind history forever. For instance, among the millennium marking events of the second millennium, we can speak about the end of the Middle Age and of the Crusades for that matter, the Black Plague, the Great Discoveries, including the one of the Americas, and World War II. Century marking events, among them I can mention in the 18th century the American Revolution, in the example of the 19th century the American Civil War, and during the past century we can mention the World War I, the Spanish influenza, the Cold War. It requires a lot of universalism to put people together in this. As I said before, the New World Order from 1991 to 2019 is itself a component of the post-World War II, that is itself a component of the Industrial Revolution, a period that we can characterize from 1830 to 2019. Did you see what I've posted about Afghanistan lately on Twitter? Thus, capitalism was a great conception of mankind's history, no question about that. It requires a lot of adaptation to, first, new data that started brutally emerging throughout the globe during the 2010s, second, the oil on fire, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, the first mankind events that characterized the third millennium, I'm afraid. On the subject of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what I mentioned before, this is not only related to the history or loyalism vis-à-vis Crimea regarding the 2014 events and Luhansk and Donetsk for the 2022 events. Putin knows, obviously, the KGB as well. These are files that trace us back to the days of Kosygin in the Troika during Brezhnev's era. Having SSRs represented at the United Nations Security Council, on the other hand, throughout the history of the 20th century, tells a lot about the will of Moscow to work in a common culture in the region that stood even after moving from the USSR to the Russian Federation status. To get back to this topic of the SSRs at the United Nations Security Council, Ukrainian SSR was not the only one sitting as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council at that time. It was also the case of Belarusian SSR, or Belarusia, currently the Belarus, in 1974 and 1975. Historically, on August the 1st, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia, opening by that event the hostilities of World War I between the two countries. A quarter of a century later, the USSR was wary from the past. Stalin stayed cautious from the Nazis. His calculations were right regarding Germany invading Soviet territory, what will lead to the Battle of Stalingrad, one of the main battles of World War II, also called the Anti-Bolshevik War by the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. During that time, the Stalingrad, the Don, and the southwestern fronts of the Red Army stood against Nazism, notably with their generals Zhukov and Voronov. We are in a different context nowadays. I am following up with the development by assessing the Russian military campaign in Ukraine from a security perspective and studying the strategy implication when it comes to the nuclear threat. and getting back also to the position of the United States, the People's Republic of China, and other European countries and the world, as well as looking to the economic insights on war in Ukraine. Before getting to the United Nations, I want to speak about the Munich Security Conference this year and getting back onto the most important things that were discussed on it. I should start with the global challenges when it comes from nuclear security and adapting NATO's nuclear posture, the semiconductor supply chain resilience, mutually assured production matter, as well as speaking about turning the tides in terms of international cooperation in a time of mounting crisis. Among the other topics on learning helplessness, meeting global challenges. Also hearing from participants about strategic circuits breakers on cooperation and competition in technology sector. Surfing the waves in order to prevent the next pandemic that was independently related to security as well. Rising tides in terms of scaling up global climate action, another pressuring topic. Also aligning efforts fighting kleptocracy throughout the world, decoding disinformation by defending democracy in the digital age. How do you expose security in a potential post-pandemic world? And the security proof in national cryptocurrencies, seeding change needed and by ensuring as well food security was among the topics that were put on the table this year at the Munich Security Conference. We spoke also about stemming the illegal side in terms of analyzing the global challenge of eroding democracy, rethinking and reinvigorating arms control. The topics were, like I said, indirectly related in terms of strategy to counter terrorism. We had also the opportunity to speak about the transatlantic and European security and good COPS by aligning international climate diplomacy. Among the other topics that caught my attention here, the US on the international stage, such as the position on Germany regarding this context of action, women's agency in conflicts and humanitarian crisis, how does it participate for peace, and as well the position of the United Kingdom. The new German Minister for Economics and Cooperation and Development brought also a conversation regarding important matters that does not concern only Germany and the European Union. Of course, the question of Ukraine was also invoked in terms of European security and analyzing the Europe's perma crisis, the Afghan aftershock from ashes to ashes, and how can we get back from the oil and fire situation that the country is raging on right now. The Sahel's fragility was also a focus during this year's conference, as well as the increase in pandemic preparedness, the East-West relations, and the European security architecture. And among the other topics, also the art of deal Iran and the future of JCPOA, frictions of rapprochement and rupture in the Middle East were also among the important topics at the Munich Security Conference. The topics that I just mentioned will lead us also to speak about then the United Nations and getting back to the multilateral system from the United Nations to NATO that is facing a make or break challenge right now because it is facing the worst conflict in Europe ever since the Balkan Wars of the 1990s, where I consider the Blue Helmets and NATO having one of their latest golden ages. The latest conferences at the United Nations Security Council during the month of February, as well as the one of the NATO, have also shown that there is a lot of actions that needs to be done, more than speeches, obviously, and that's what puts back in question so many things. France, for instance, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, had more military cooperation with the United States when France was not a NATO member than when it was a NATO member. Within a new security policy, I sense that France would leave NATO soon enough. A whole culture from the multilateral perspective needs to be reviewed right now, and that's why we see what's going on in the world without blaming COVID on nobody. But there are other things that I will come back and speak about right now besides Ukraine. Even before moving to the United Nations Security Council, just a reminder that besides the pandemic, besides the Russian-Ukrainian war, we must not forget about the question of climate change that was invoked at the Munich Security Conference as well. I spoke about it lately, and I will always come back to emphasize on the emergency of achieving the Vision 2050. Otherwise, we are basically condemning mankind to slow death, one without viruses and without weapons. We have also a lot of critical conflicts in the world right now. That includes also situations of political instability and dire economic uncertainty. In Europe, for example, in the Belarus, the Bosnia and Herzegovina, Cyprus, Kosovo, Northern Macedonia, and Moldova. In the Americas, in Colombia, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. In Africa, in Burkina Faso, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia with the Tigray conflict, the Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, Libya, Mali, Mozambique, Niger, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan. In Asia and the Pacific, issues in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Timor-Leste, Iraq, the issue between Israel and Palestine. I will not speak about the INSS report from Tel Aviv in this video, but I will get back to it soon enough as well. Also issues in Lebanon, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Syria, Tajikistan, Tonga, and Yemen, and many others. Some of these topics will be within the program of work of the United Nations Security Council under the presidency of the United Arab Emirates. We're starting by analyzing the issues of the UNAMA, then the one of the UNIMIS South Sudan during this week, and then always UNIMIS the following week, and the open debate related to women and peace and security from economic inclusion through partnerships. There will be a focus on the Middle East, especially Syria. Coming back also to the OSCE, the 1540 committee the following week. Always Middle East and South Sudan, the issues of Libya in terms of sanctions and the UNSMIL. Speaking also about the 1701 reports, and during the fourth week of March, there will be also opportunity to look at the cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations from the perspective of the League of Arab States. There will be also debates related to the 1591 committee, the UNITMS, the MONUSCO, and the UNDAF. So looking forward to following up with the work of the United Nations Security Council this month under the presidency of the United Arab Emirates. And like I invoked before, many things need to be reviewed regarding the United Nations Security Council as a body that does not target only the question of the veto power, but goes far beyond, as I said in February, when it comes to the privacy on the matter of several issues. And the question of representation has to be also spoken about: permanent members versus non-permanent members. Spoken before about the area formula, which is like a third class member state participating on the event of the United Nations Security Council. Excuse me for using the word, but we have just to paraphrase the thing sometimes, just to understand why the bodies are not working. So, as I mentioned before, the area formula meetings are basically conferences and meetings that allow the non-members of the Security Council during that time to also participate in certain issues in a legitimate and confidential setting related to the program of work of the Security Council. But these modalities, if I may, how can they still keep the synergy between the member states beyond the diplomatic standpoint? And for the UN body as a whole, given the grave crisis and state of utmost emergency mankind is going through right now. Getting back now to counterterrorism and analyzing the reports of the work of the UNOCT, the IPU, and the UNODC related to the model legislative provision in order to support the needs and protect the rights of victims of terrorism. Among the important things to mention in this context of action is the joint effort of the three organizations regarding this work. I do believe that it's very important to go further from the jurisdictional application and focus on coordination, cooperation, and oversight in terms of establishment of coordination body for victims of terrorism and registry of victims. Then important to analyze the right to assistance that includes availability, accessibility, assessment, and accountability, and the right to reparation that could include the right to rehabilitation, reparation procedures, the right to restitution, the right to compensation, the creation of a state's compensation fund for victims of terrorism, the right to satisfaction, and also mutual legal assistance. After that, it's very keen to have an understanding of the measures to protect, if I may, the physical and psychological integrity and privacy of victims of terrorism by bringing protective measures in relation to legal proceeding and also protective measures outside of the legal proceeding, and also in terms of privacy and relationship between victims and the media. The right to information, that is something that comes out not just in this context of action, but also, if I may, go back to the United Nations Security Council. Privacy versus confidentiality, a huge debate. The access to justice, that include the participation of victims in criminal proceeding and having concrete restorative justice. Working on consular assistance and protection, focusing on child victims, working on victims of sexual and gender-based violence by terrorist groups in terms of specific assistance needs, and also on specific evidentiary standards and procedures. The victims of trafficking by terrorist groups is something to analyze. The armed conflict and displacement and migration in terms as well of internal displacement and international migration has to be an important point in this context of action. Most importantly, looking at organizations representing the interests of victims of terrorism by looking at organizations that basically work for the engagement with victims organization on the ground, the participation of the victim organization in this context of action, including in the judicial proceedings, as I mentioned. So it's a very, very rich report, 152 page. And I'm still reading many parts of it right now because it's a very long process, and looking forward to continuing this important analysis in the context of counterterrorism. The work of the UNOCT was also characterized in February by the high-level launch of the global network of experts on the protection of vulnerable targets against terrorist attacks. Qatar is basically the main funder of this Unicity Pioneer program on the protection of vulnerable targets. Among the other actions that I could mention, also the work of the Doha Center of the Unicity that works onto an international hub on behavioral insight to counter terrorism. Uh, by talking on a virtual workshop on using BI to address the intersection of internet, mental health, and radicalization to violent extremism in Europe. Like I said, the effort here was made by the Unicity Program Office in Doha, Qatar. Among the most recent thing in the work of the Unicity was to work with the Arab countries, the meeting with several ministries of interior in order to speak about how to continue maintaining a certain strategy of counterterrorism in the MENA region. I will move now to the technical aspect of counterterrorism, the seated work. So, getting back to the reports of the State of International Cooperation for Lawful Access to Digital Evidence, if I may, I made the differentiation between Unicity as most of an administrative entity of the United Nations in counterterrorism. Meanwhile, the seated CTC is mostly a technical organization in terms of analysis. So the report has been made possible through funding provided by Germany, and it has been prepared for informal purposes only. The contents are very rich, although it does not necessarily represent the views or official positions of the Counterterrorism Committee in this matter. Very important for to analyze the major reform efforts, the multilateral initiatives. When I'm speaking about that, I shall invoke basically the several endeavors that are made in the context of having the international organization working on multilateral initiatives such as the draft of the United Nations Convention on Countering the Use of Information and Communication Technologies for Criminal Purposes, the Council on Europe, speaking here about the second additional protocol to Budapest Convention. Getting back also to analyzing this reform efforts, the regional and state-led initiatives, speaking about the one of the European Union in terms of e-evidence regulation, the one of Brazil, Marco Civil da Internet, the one of the People's Republic of China, Data Security Law and Personal Information Protection Law, the one of India, Personal Data Protection Bill of 2021, the one of the Russian Federation, Data Localization Law, and the one of the United States, the Cloud Act. Other relevant initiatives in this context of action could be added to a very big synthesis here that includes the United Nations initiatives, the Sirius Project, the G7 24/7 Cybercrime Network, the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. Important to analyze the trends and challenges in this matter by looking at the legal fragmentation, the decreased interoperability, the localization, international concerns, the private sector practice, and looking ahead by ensuring interoperability and expanding capacity. Very medium-sized report, 33 page, still working on it as well. I was happy also to join Akim Steiner and the UNDP and other participants to the global launch of the new special report on human security. I will not speak about it on this video, but I'm still analyzing many parts of the report. I will get back to it soon enough in order to speak about it. But I can go ahead and speak in Spanish a little bit about the efforts of the UNDP in Latin America. El Bureau Regional para América Latina y el Caribe del PNUD trabaja por un lanzamiento de un nuevo libro cuando la coyuntura se encuentra con la estructura viñetas sobre el desarrollo y la crisis de la COVID-19 en América Latina y el Caribe. Es un libro que se basa en la serie Graph for Truth y reúne 30 viñetas basadas en datos para contar la historia de los desafíos de desarrollo estructural en la región de América Latina y Caribe, y cómo esto está cambiando a raíz de la pandemia. Más importante desafíos para el desarrollo en América Latina y los Caribes. Si lo dices que los hacemos ahora, ¿vale? Gracias. Getting back now to speak about the topic that I was invoking related to the analysis on important matter for counterterrorist work, the healthy aging, brain control of longevity and metabolism, how this affect the work in terms of counterterrorism. Just at a glance, why the topic is very important is to analyze the reason of us aging and what exactly happens to our body as we age, and how do our everyday choices affect our aging process. In aging population, these questions become more and more pressing as aging-associated and neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson, and diabetes mellitus increasingly strain our health systems. Understanding the molecular mechanism involved in degenerative aging processes and can help develop new therapeutic approaches that lead to a healthier way of living for older and ill individuals, and eventually for us all. Many questions could be basically put through here in order to have a better understanding, such as which cells are responsible for the deterioration of the body and how the loss of control is communicated within the cell system, how the central nervous system regulates food intake and influences energy availability in the body, and how aging research can help prevent severe cases of aging associated diseases resulting in healthier lives. It seems off topic to counterterrorism, but trust me, it's very helpful when you go in depth on the answers of these important research questions. Quick point about the algebra of decision. In order to make a good decision, you actually need to think about it, the contours and the consequences. And getting back to this famous equation, the algebra of decision equals capitalism plus stoicism plus atheism, all of it between brackets, multiplied by mentor. A very rich question to analyze. Indeed, right now public markets synthesize billions of signals every second and distill these bits and emotions into an indifferent number that points into a direction. Private markets take longer to reflect reality because private ownership changes hands less often and out of view, but private markets inevitably come in line, and just like the tail of a whip, the smaller markets can deliver greater pain. Growth hedges funds are registering their worst numbers in years. Earlier this month, Tiger Global announced it was pulling back from funding large late-stage startups. So did D1 Capital, another growth specialist. Question why? Answer simple: is they believe there is now better value in public markets. Eyes wide shut synthesis. For 2 decades, the script lighting and backdrop have all centered around one narrative: grow at any cost. More raising, hiring, building, the fun parts of running a company. All the while, investors rub the smalls of CEOs' backs and channel their inner, like Billy Joy would say, I love you just the way you are. But like I said, this goes back also to what I have been speaking in the beginning of the video about how we have to assess capitalism throughout the 2020s into an era of historic change. Now I will go back and speak about the work of counterterrorism from the perspective of several countries, starting with the Kingdom of Morocco by invoking the endeavors of the Unicity Program Office in Rabat, launching a pioneer program on counterterrorism, training in Africa, promoting cooperation and providing effective support to member states against terrorist threats. This has included the permanent missions of Morocco, of Togo as well, Mali, Niger, and or Ghana and Libya. In between brackets, as I have invoked Libya here, and since we have all this pressure of the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, always looking forward to following the process in Libya that I have been speaking before in my very latest videos. Among the other things that involve the work of the kingdom in terms of partnership in the context of counterterrorism and defense, this time with the United States, speaking about the leadership from the United States Naval Forces, Europe, Africa, the 6th Fleet, and the Royal Moroccan Navy in the staff talks that took place in Casablanca in February the 21st, 2022. Among the things that I can mention lately that has been done from a national perspective in Morocco is the work in terms of intelligence information provided by the interest of the General Directorate of Territorial Surveillance, the Central Bureau of Judicial Research, that was able to arrest an extremist element in Tata loyal to the so-called Islamic State, suspected of being involved in preparing for the implementation of terrorist plots with the cross-border intersections. I commend therefore the continuous efforts of His Majesty King Mohammed VI in terms of the leadership in the MENA region when it comes to counterterrorism. Moving now to the United States, and wanted to speak first about the DoD 2023 budget, and this is very important. In order to understand it, you have to go on to these questions that I have already invoked. What's the difference in this administration national defense strategy, the major budget movements, where is the money going, changes in military forces, what grows and what gets cut, the politics of the 2023 budget, and of course what happens next. This will be elaborated in time throughout the year, but I want to get back here and speak about a very prescient topic, which is the State of Decisions report analysis into this DoD. And for that, I want to speak about the fact that we have to analyze the size, the posture, the war-fighting concepts, and the equipment that should the U.S. military possess in order to defend national interests. The Department of Defense makes these decisions every day. Made incorrectly, this choices could cost United States service members their lives and America a war. While intuition can play a role for the best chance of success, such decisions must be supported by data-driven analysis. Yet in 2018, the National Defense Strategy Commission found the DoD struggled to link objectives to operational concepts, to capabilities, to program and resources, and blamed this on a deficit analytical capability, expertise, and processes. A shortfall in DoD analytics capability should be a concern to all Americans. So you agree with me that this is an important question when it comes to the defense, when we speak from the perspective of the DoD. Of course, many other topics will be also invoked during the Global Security Forum that will focus on foreign policy in an era of domestic division. I'll be looking forward to joining the CSIS for this important event that also will feature the Secretaries Panetta and Cohen for this discussion. Looking also to join in the Army Chief of Staff General McConville in order to speak about Army priorities of the United States Army. This will lead us, of course, to speak about specific topics to be discussed as project conversions, the key modernization priorities of long-range precision fires and future vertical lifts, the impact of Army Futures Command, the upcoming challenges in 2023, and the balance between the Army size and mission requirements. Now, always in the context of the federal government, I want to get back to the critical questions related to the takeaways from the supply chain plan for 2022. And for that, it's very important to analyze the Executive Order 14017 on American supply chain that basically unveiled the plan to revitalize American manufacture and secure critical supply chain in 2022. and basically speaking about the six additional supply chain reports in the following areas: the Department of Energy on the energy industrial base, and another good report of the Department of Transportation on the transportation industrial base, the US Department of Agriculture on the agricultural commodities and the food products ecosystem, the Department of Health and Human Services when it comes to the public health and the biological preparedness industrial base, the Department of Commerce and Department of Homeland Securities on the information and communication technology, the ICT, the industrial base, and the Department of Defense when it comes to the defense industrial base that I have been speaking at a glance about few minutes. Okay. So the intake here is to talk about the building off of a full 100-day supply chain reviews of the semiconductor batteries, critical materials, and pharmaceutical supply chain released in June 2021 by analyzing the February 2022 capstone reports that provide an overview of this context of action. Main questions: what are the key takeaways from the plan agency's reports? Analyzing in this context of action the Export-Import Bank, the EXIM, Domestic Manufacturing Initiative, the new Buy American provisions, the critical minerals and clean energy, and other points. The other question is related to what is the promise of this administration approach, then what are the perils in the same context. And of course, analyzing what could happen next in terms of certain policy changes. This will lead us, of course, to the synthesis of the work of Understanding Washington that I divide at several sections: the power in operation, executive branch, that includes the White House, the NSC, and interagency process, working with the Congress, the CFIUS, and the regulatory environment, the role of the states, and for that matter, in my situation, I'm working and focusing on the governance and the role of administration in the states of New York and New Jersey. Right now, from a perspective of counterterrorism, still analyzing the role of the litigator in both states. Getting back to the federal level to see that also in this analysis of Understanding Washington, important to speak about legal guardrails by operating within the law, assessing breaking developments, and managing risks. Thus, developing a clearer understanding of Washington's operating universe and rules and norms is essential to becoming a more effective communicator and problem solver. Long story short. I was delighted. Now moving to the third country I'm going to speak about after Morocco and the United States, to hear the discussion of First Sea Lord Admiral Sir Ben Key from the Royal Navy. And among the other things that I want to focus on when it comes to the UK, the report launch related to the future of the US-UK alliance. Over the past 75 years, the United States and the United Kingdom have built the deepest intelligence alliance in the world. Despite decades of cooperation, however, there exists today a significant misalignment between the strategic prioritizations of this special relationship and the regulation policies, organizational cultures, and technologies that facilitate its day-to-day activities. Building on its ongoing work to assess the future of the intelligence in partnership with the Royal United Services Institute, the CSIS undertook basically a 10-month project to develop a roadmap for the new era of the US-UK Intelligence Alliance. The final reports from this study propose a set of 6 priorities that the United States and the UK intelligence community should jointly pursue to enable robust, scalable, and rapid collaboration. So I'll be looking forward to this report and discussion with great interest, as it will help to have a better understanding regarding the upcoming strategy and policy of both countries in the matters of counterterrorism and defense. Now, moving to the People's Republic of China, focusing here on the topic of the Belt Road and beyond, speaking about how China is leading an economy that could be basically 1 trillion flagship foreign policy efforts of Xi Jinping in order to reshape global networks of trade, transport, and political ties within and between countries for decades to come. But since its announcement, it has remained shrouded in confusion and controversy, and it now faces major challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic. So I will go in terms of synthesis in 6 sections in order to have a better analysis of this topic. The first one related to the health Silk Road and COVID-19 impacts, then China's leaned-in and debt risks, the Sino-Russian cooperation and competition, China's domestic politics and economic motivations, the ground realities in several markets of the People's Republic of China today. I include Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Arctic, and finally the digital Silk Road. So in this context of action, we're speaking about program coordination and management from the Chinese Business and Economic Bureau. It is important to focus on the China's political economy and coordination with what is ongoing also in the world. Be keen on supporting the budget management, financial reporting, schedule meetings and activities that could lead, of course, to the cooperation with the People's Republic of China. And of course, most importantly, having an effort to understand external stakeholders in government, the private sector, and the non-profit community in the United States, China, and elsewhere. Moving now to Japan to speak about the cooperation that it has with the United States in terms of the next generation telecom. Very important topic. The next generation of telecommunication infrastructure will require diverse and innovative technologies that can help keep up with the amount of information being shared. It is particularly important for the US and Japan to promote investment in telecommunications infrastructure that is secure, open, and transparent. Leaders from the United States, Japan, Australia, and India met last year in order to discuss this very topic, highlighting the need to foster the initiative and trustworthy telecommunication vendors through approaches like the Open Radio Access Network, the Open RAN, which was included in this current administration's in the United States within the new Indo-Pacific strategy. More can the US and Japan do to help develop Open RAN? How can the US and Japan work with emerging markets to make sure their network systems are secure as well? Always in Asia, moving right now to the Republic of Korea in order to speak about the impact of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership CPTPP, and economic trade in Asia when it comes to South Korea. I will get back to speak furthermore regarding this topic as it is also impacting the United States South Korea's relationships. Always in the Republic of Korea, focusing on the topic related to applying the AUKUS model in South Korea. The AUKUS agreement transfer of nuclear submarine technology to Australia could substantially enhance Indo-Pacific security, giving Canberra the high-endurance, long-distance, stealthy platform it needs to project power to seas that China might contest. But the AUKUS model could also be applied to benefit other US Asian allies, most importantly South Korea and Japan. Although leaders in both nations advocate acquisition of nuclear submarines right now. Which set of options might be the most likely to strengthen alliance security ties between Washington and Seoul? Moving always in Northeast Asia, this time to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to laud the efforts related to ordering military education institution to help out with the Hwasong apartment construction. North Korean authorities have issued an order to military education related organizations, including Kim Il sung Military University, to deploy personnel for the construction of 10,000 new housing units in Pyongyang's Hwasong area. This order was issued the day after Supreme Leader Kim Jong un attended the groundbreaking for the construction of the apartment. In this context, the Ministry of Defense called on units to respond to the expectation of the party, which hopes to open an age of great prosperity and construction with a sea change by producing clear results in housing construction for the people. Cadets from military academies and officers training schools were deployed in months-long shifts during the last year's construction of 10,000 units in Pyongyang, Songsin, and Songhua areas. This year's construction will presumably follow a similar pattern. The authority also clearly aimed to actively mobilize idle personnel while emphasizing how the entire party, the entire people, and the entire military must carry out construction work together. Military academies and officer training schools across the country have also been tasked with other construction tasks besides Kim's prized Hwasong apartment project in Pyongyang. Specifically, the Ministry of Defense issued orders to schools and students according to region, service, and specialty, including Kim Il sung Military University, Kim Jong il University of Military Politics, and Kim Il sung University of Politics in Pyongyang, the Air Force Academy in North Hamgyong Province, and the Navy Academy in South Hamgyong Province. Always in North Korea, very important to speak about the new greenhouse in the rural areas growing tons of vegetables, just not for locals. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un participated in the groundbreaking ceremony for construction of Ryonpo Greenhouse Farm held in Ryonpo area of Hamju County in South Hamgyong Province. Authorities started the greenhouse farm project, the first of its kind in North Korea, in Jongpyeong village, which is part of Gyeongsang County in the northeastern province of North Hamgyong. The farm sits on 419 acres of land and includes about 300 greenhouses. The Jongpyeong Vegetable Greenhouse Farm is considered a pilot program in North Korea. Another greenhouse farm is already under construction in nearby South Hamgyong Province, Hamju County. The authorities have plans to expand greenhouses farms to other provinces throughout the DPRK. Moving back now to analyze some topics of migration, starting with South American immigrants in the United States. Immigrants from South America comprise a small share of the total U.S. immigration population indeed. However, arrivals from the region have increased in the recent years and flows are diversifying. Many of the 3.4 million South Americans living in the United States as of 2019 immigrated during the Cold War era. Victims of authoritarian regimes, poor economic conditions, and internal armed conflicts that drove migration from countries including Argentina and Chile. A shift of the U.S. policies made immigration more feasible in the 1990s and 2000s. Social and economic crises fueled further departures from the region. More recently, the United States has become an emerging destination for Venezuelans. Most of the nearly 6 million Venezuelans who make up Latin America's largest exodus in the recent years remain in other countries in South America, particularly Colombia, Peru, Chile, and Ecuador. However, economic devastation amid the COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with changing political winds in some of the host countries, has prompted a small but growing number of Venezuelans to move onwards again, often towards the United States. The U.S. Border Patrol encountered Venezuelan nationals nearly 25,000 times at the U.S.-Mexico border in December 2021, record high and 29-fold increase over December 2020. Similar economic factors have also driven immigration of nationals of other countries in the region, mainly Ecuador and Brazil. Overall, South American immigrants in the United States represented close to 8% of the 44.9 million foreign born in the United States in 2019, up from the 1% in 1960. They account for a fraction of all immigration from Latin America, with population from Mexico and Central America significantly larger. In 2019, the South American countries accounting for the largest number of nationals in the United States were Colombia, 24% of all South American immigrants, then Brazil, 15%, Venezuela, 13%, Peru, 13%, Ecuador, 13% as well. Together, these five countries accounted for nearly 80% of the total South American immigrants' populations in the United States. Since the onset of the political and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela in 2014, the number of Venezuelans residing in the United States has more than doubled, moving from 6th to 3rd place in size of immigrants population from South America. In 2020, 17.6 million South Americans resided outside their county or country of birth, including 5.4 million Venezuelans, 3 million Colombians, and 1.9 million Brazilians, according to mid-2020 estimates by the United Nations Population Division. Of these, about 8.6 million, or 49%, lived elsewhere within the region. Outside the region, the United States is by far the top destination for South Americans, followed by Spain, Italy, Canada, and Japan. On average, most South American immigrants obtain lawful permanent residence in the United States, also known as receiving a green card through family ties. By and large, South American immigrants mirror the socio-demographic characteristic of the overall U.S. immigrant population, with a few exceptions. They tend to be slightly more educated and more likely to participate in labor force. Using data from the United States Census Bureau 2019 American Community Survey, as well as pulled in 2015 ACS data and the Department of Homeland Security's Yearbook Immigration Statistics, a spotlight that provide information on the South American population in the United States, focusing on the size of geographic distribution and socioeconomic characteristics. Another topic of migration now that I'm looking forward to studying furthermore related to the challenge of coordinating border management assistance between Europe and the Maghreb region. In order to have a better understanding here, key points to analyze: first of all, the migration dynamics and priorities in the Maghreb by looking at the irregular migration trends and routes in the Maghreb, and also how Maghrebi governments view irregular migration. Finally, there is also the second point related to transnational threats in terms of dynamic and priorities. Then the challenges to securing the region's border in terms of geography, coordination, equipment, political will. And looking at the European cooperation with the Maghreb and border security in the region, that includes three key research questions. What has been the focus of the cooperation? What forms does this cooperation take? And what are the results of this cooperation to date? And of course, looking synthesis-wise at the lessons learned and recommendations. Concluding my video, last but not least, getting back to my topics of counterterrorism, by analyzing the Global Terrorism Index of 2022 and measuring the impact of terrorism in this context of action. We'll go quick regarding the important things that we have to look at. First of all, in terms of results, we have to analyze the Global Terrorism Index map, the terrorist incident map, terrorism in 2021, COVID-19, and terrorism, of course. The terrorist groups, going one by one to analyze furthermore. I've already spoken that you have to go way further than the race and the religion, but also onto every psychological aspect in order to get your knowledge furthermore in terms of expertise when it comes to issues of intelligence and counterterrorism. And looking also at an insight of the 10 countries that are most impacted by terrorism as part of this report of 100 pages that I will be looking forward to analyzing furthermore. An important point on it is trends in terrorism by looking at the ideological trends in the West and the regional trends. terrorism in the Sahel, important region, always speaking about it. The countries in conflicts, as mentioned earlier in the video, that includes terrorism in the Sahel context, the ecological threats and terrorism in the Sahel, and the regional case studies, country by country. Terrorism and conflict. So how can we understand it? Through terrorism and insurgency, the correlates of terrorism and disrupting terrorist groups and networks. And among the contributions of expertise that I will be focusing on in this report too, and that I will speak about in future videos, comes the technology of terror, from dynamite to the metaverse, analyzing all of them as much as possible, why Morocco's counterterrorism evolution matters to Africa, and finally, sub-Saharan Africa at a crossroad. Stay tuned. Much obliged.